here to just like regurgitate something or just like paint something for money. Like if my channel's not clear and I'm not feeling like connection to source, then I won't. It's hard for me to create.
So this is part of your method then, right? Your spiritual practice is part of your creative process.
They're one and the same, I'd say. I mean, just part of my process. And growing up, I'm Asian, African, Native American, and European, and just my mom always said you can't hate anyone because they're all part of you. And in a larger sense, like studying philosophy, anthropology, that's we're all one anyways. Everyone observes differently. We can look at something and everyone sees something different, or everyone can watch something happen and then they go and interview everyone and you got 10 different stories about the same thing. Kachi, Ariankhka, out here in 29 Palms.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. How long have you been in 29 Palms?
This is going on almost 3 years. 29 Palms.
Nice. And what brought you out here?
Well, I just wanted to, a lot of different reasons. A friend of mine was out here and they were holding space for some different activities. And I've just like the landscape, I've lived in pretty much all the different zones of America, from the Appalachians to the south to Boulder, Colorado, high mountains. Never lived in the desert, never thought I would.
Right on.
Also wanted to expand things with my art, but couldn't afford to buy a place in LA, so I was able to get one out here because after decades of renting and realizing,
Yeah, I like that you use the word expanding to talk about your art. I feel like the desert promotes that kind of creative expansion. Did you feel that happened when you moved out here?
I definitely felt the expansion. I felt like it's a mirror of yourself. Like for a while when I was moving, I was out here by myself on the property and it was 116 degrees and I just walked out midday, actually naked. It was where I was at. I was just feeling this whole thing, and all these emotions and just different reflections came up. So I feel like it's definitely a place where you can't run from yourself. So it forces you to expand consciousness in a lot of different ways.
How do you feel that's impacted your art, your painting?
Well, it's made me strive to express things in different ways. The art's a continual process, and as long as the process is fulfilling you and keeping your art alive and bringing you joy no matter what it is or who the artist is, then I feel like you're expanding.
That's fair. When did you start making art? How long have you been painting?
Well, I always was into art. It's interesting that grew up in Washington D.C. in the South, mostly South Carolina and North Carolina, and I come from a third generation family of hard workers, and a family owned business, and football all male dominated, and my mother pushed for me to take piano, but the arts weren't really pushed. But I was always interested in elementary school. We had a shoe drawing club. That's how I actually started, and then also we were drawing. We and my friends were trying to make comic books and different stuff, and one of the teachers told my mom it was too crazy, but I don't think this is the 80s, so they weren't.
I love how you preserved that in your contemporary pieces. As you're describing yourself back then, I'm getting that from the pieces that we have behind you right now. Do you feel like you had to, did you explore other styles or other ways of painting, or did you always know who you were as an artist?
Well, I was an odyssey of the mind. I was into just all the arts, performing art, rapping, music, everybody wanted to sing Boys to Men, so there's little singing groups, but I kind of got pushed away that just from the environment I was in, because it wasn't really promoted, so I kind of went dark on the art, although I always consider myself an artist in other ways, but I didn't get back into actual painting until I moved to Boulder, Colorado. And
so how old were you then?
I was late 20s.
So you took a big chunk of time off of painting?
Yeah, I took a big chunk off. I was just exploring the world. Still doing a lot of writing. I was experimenting with writing poetry, screenplays. songs, but
That's an interesting aspect to who you are as a creator, that you are multidisciplinary, and I see that in your work. You know, do you feel like that gives you an added lens to view the world through because you have these different mediums to work with?
so I got lost in the streets a little bit for a good portion of my like late teens to mid 20s, and continued on, but just not as wild. And like I just feel like Spirit put me there as a witness, because I witnessed everything from the highest echelon of society to like the lowest ghetto type, having a best friend growing up whose mom was selling herself for drugs, and feeling the pain of my friend who spent the night at my house every night because he was just embarrassed. And as a kid, you didn't know till later. My mom kind of told me what was going on. To playing, I got a scholarship to play football at a prep school that was mainly white, and included all of like old South aristocracy, kids whose first cars were Range Rovers.
I get that, yeah.
So just seeing all these dynamics. Being on one side, my mom was Catholic. On the other side, my dad was like Southern Baptist. Seeing the different dichotomies of culture, of just people, watching people suffer, people win, people with money that still weren't happy, people like going from the world of the private schools, seeing like wow, this girl's like super paid, but she's unhappy because her like dad's having an affair on her mom, versus like kids from where I grew up that were like in abject poverty and just didn't even have time to think about those kind of issues because they were like trying to put food on the table, or a relative or a parent was fighting a drug addiction or abuse.
So you're very much an observer, right? You're observing the world and then reflecting that back through your painting.
Yeah, in a way to make everyone more conscious without anger, because like growing up, I'm Asian, African, Native American, and European, and just my mom always said you can't hate anyone because they're all part of you. And in a larger sense, like studying philosophy, anthropology, we're all one anyway. And I thought about one of the things is like an artist of color, or like Native American artist or African American artist, when you depict things that people don't want to deal with, it brings out so many emotions that people get angry. So they can be like, oh, you're just always focusing on something that's dark, or why don't you like, and I'm like, well, I'm not mad at anyone. I'm just trying to show from a historical context, how we can all get together and what has happened and how we can evolve to not let these things happen again.
I love how you play with that paradox, especially anger as an emotion, right? Because it's a secondary emotion. It's covering up something else, typically sadness, right? How do you feel? Was that a conscious decision when you were making these paintings?
Yes, I mean, at first I started out very, like, both my grandmothers were educators, which was rare for women of color, or just a woman in general at the time they came up, like Great Depression era. To both my grandmothers had college degrees, and neither of my grandfathers did. So they always pushed education. I'm like, oh my, and I told my dad racism didn't exist anymore because I had white friends, I had Asian friends, I just never saw like, oh, I'm just this or that. And when I first got my dose of like, wow, racism's real, and or a different water fountain, or not be able to go to this part of town for fear of actually being killed, so, but reading these books, it made me angry because I'm like, wow, like, if God is so good and what I'm learning at church and in theology, and how is it that this, like, how are these Native Americans, how are these Africans, like, being mutilated, lynched, beat, killed, stolen from, like, this isn't right, so I'm like, got a little revolutionary, but later in my teachings I realized, like, we gotta let the anger go,
You know what, I have so much respect for you as a person, but also for you as a masculine presence, right? Because it takes a lot of fortitude to move through anger as an emotion, especially when you've experienced struggle or oppression or any of those things. To find art as an outlet and to really utilize it to communicate your message is like high level.
two different teachers. I had an African teacher, this guy named King Karu. He always said, you gotta let everybody off the hook. He's like, I'm not mad about anything, but I haven't forgotten anything either. And then I was working with an indigenous healer in the Amazon, Banki Piaco, and I just saw like, he gave a teaching one day that was like, the worst thing a person can have is anger. Anger just destroys everything. It causes cancer. It just blocks out all the love from the universe trying to come in, and it makes healing and advancing in life so much harder.
So you just let it out. That's exactly what you're doing on these paintings,
Yeah.
and then you're not carrying it anymore?
I mean, it's a process. I'd like to say that I'm definitely like more advanced in the path of dealing with anger. I think that also transitioning from like things that now I've learned that maybe like anger is the first response initially, but then I realize I'm not really mad, I'm sad. This is just sad, it's my heart, you know. This is a lot of my earlier stuff, with exception to, this is something I started and then finished strong, but a lot of my more recent stuff I sold, and I took a little break from painting, just like surviving in life, and just, because part of my process is like, regardless of any style or anything, if I'm not clear, if I don't feel like a connection to spirit, I won't paint. I'm not here to just like regurgitate something or just like paint something for money. Like if my channel's not clear and I'm not feeling like connection to source, then you know I won't. It's hard for me to create.
So this is part of your method then, right? Your spiritual practice is part of your creative process.
They're one and the same, I'd say. I mean, just part of my process, and I feel like every great artist, whether they were a writer, a poet, a singer, visual art, sculptor, they were expressing something coming from a spirit, something that, you know, you can learn more advanced techniques by going, like I never went to art school, but my friend who's a brilliant painter, Matt DeGrotto, he's like, dude, you can learn technique. A lot of people just don't have vision, you know.
This is true. Do you feel like spirit speaks through you?
Definitely. Like I'll be working on stuff, or you know, now I've like transitioned. I didn't break. I did one series of just like drip flowers, which is totally different with like UV reactive stuff. Different things I've experimented with, but early on I was just expressing myself and kind of like what I felt through the lens of the world, and like all these things. I should have brought these many, just my view of like history in the world. I've always been a student of history and just wanting to know like the source of things, from spirituality to human nature, you know.
So your work is really an anthology, and it's informed by all of these subjects that you're passionate about and your experiences in the world.
I'd definitely say, and me putting the pieces together to kind of see how I'm taking, because everyone observes differently. We can look at something and everyone sees something different, or you know, everyone can watch something happen and then they go and interview everyone, and you got 10 different stories about the same thing that everyone saw.
That's a great point, and you know, I'm curious, is there a particular way that you would like your work to be perceived? Like, are you leading us somewhere? Are you using certain symbols, or are you just communicating in the visual language and kind of leaving it up to interpretation?
I'd say a little of both, you know, depending on the piece, you know, like if I'm doing a drip flower, it's abstract, you know, I hope it's bringing beauty and feeling of joy, versus like kind of seeing where my head's at in something like this, you know, and pop culture, and just, you know, I grew up born in the 80s, but I'd say formative in the 90s, so you got, at that time, the emergence of like grunge, you know, Kurt Cobain.
I saw some of your grunge
Tupac,
pieces, yeah.
Wu-Tang Clan, and I was a dude that was like skateboarding, chilling, so like I was pushing boundaries where the blackers were like, yo, black people don't skateboard. Now I see Lil Wayne skateboards, you know, I was just ahead of the time where like, you can't be in a Nirvana cover band, like, and still like Tupac. It's like, why not, you know? It's like, this is culture, this is, if you like something, you like something, you know, and I'm really glad to see the youth of today really embracing that, and all the different types of artists and creators that I see just merging all types of different styles, cultures, ethnicities, you know, flavors. So I really feel like we kind of did our job in the 90s to kind of push those boundaries.
Do you feel like part of your personality as a creator or just in general likes to intentionally play with this paradox?
Oh yeah, because it's just showing people you don't know what you really like until you expose yourself to something or try it. Like, you know, where I'm from, like hardcore death metal stuff was not like, you know, but then once I dated a girl, she said, you know what, I'm gonna take you to a hardcore show. I was like, I'm gonna go just for the experience. I'm down to experience at least anything once, you know, and I actually was super cool people, you know, great show, great environment, just people expressing themselves differently than some other people express themselves, but nonetheless, all great people, good vibes, you know.
Do you think, or would you agree with the statement that your style is a direct reflection of who you are as a person?
I say in a lot of ways, you know, I don't let anybody off the hook. Like in this painting, you know, I've got Michael Jordan, who is in a lot of ways like a hero to many, but he's wearing a slave collar because I feel that, you know, corporate America put the yoke on him because it's like, you know, kids are suffering, and the time we grew up, 80s, 90s crack epidemic, people were actually murdering people for Michael Jordan sneakers because some kids wanted them so bad they couldn't afford one. And like, people are actually getting killed for sneakers. And then I see Spike Lee, who's always so conscious, but it's like, Spike, do the right thing, but you making Jordan commercials knowing brothers are dying for these sneakers. You know, that's why I got the Glock. And then right here, it's like an old white man in a conversation told me, things in America won't change until our #1 export changes. Do you know what that is, Kachi? And I was like, no, I don't. He's like, guns are America's #1 export. I said, I did not know that. It's like our way of life, all that we love is paid for by other people getting killed. And I was like, and this guy from a total different generation than me that I was not expecting to get this teaching from. You know, so that's why I threw that in there.
You're really having the conversation on the canvas. Like, I'm looking at the question right here, why do we hurt others? You know, it's in a very central location. So you're having this conversation with yourself, but you're also inviting others to have it with you.
Oh, yeah, that's, I even remixed, like, you know, Malcolm X had the famous thing, by any means necessary, but I changed it to by any means of love. Because in central, underneath Jordan, is a guy named Jesse Washington, who was a mentally handicapped 14-year-old, he was a 14 or 17-year-old black guy in Texas that was a field hand for a white farmer that murdered his wife, but then blamed it on Jesse. And he was, before he could even be arraigned and brought to trial or any type of court appearance, they drug him out of the court, and 30,000 people lowered him and like they burned him alive, like slowly, then mutilated his body and gave it away for souvenirs and made postcards. You know, so it's just like certain parts of history where you're like, is this real? Like, yeah, this is real. Like, this really happened. Not to like glorify it, you know, and it doesn't mean that
You're dealing with it. This is how you're coping with that.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that, hey, even if your great-great-grandfather was one of the people that helped burn Jesse, it doesn't mean that that's how you are, you know? So we also have to, as African Americans or Native Americans or people who have been hurt by the system in America, we have to forgive and realize, like, you know, anyone in any culture can do something bad. There were Africans that helped with the slave trade. There were Native American tribes that had war parties that raided and took other tribes hostage and, you know, made them slaves. So it's not a question of ethnicity or color. You know, everyone's, it's more of a moral dilemma of energy, of light and dark, you know, and what someone chooses to embrace.
Wow, what a great life's philosophy. I'm wondering, is this why you felt so connected to Black Cactus?
You know, I heard about Black Cactus, and I had not met Terrence, and I heard all these wonderful things about him. And one night I was out at the Outer Bar, And my friend Sanjay actually introduced me to Terrence. Like, this is Terrence, bro. Because he had told me he had hung with Terrence and had such a great conversation. He's like, dude, you really need to connect with this guy. He's like, I just know you need to connect with this guy. And then, I connected with Terrence. He was like, hey, I've been out a little bit. I got to go in, but stop by Black Cactus, And I was kind of unsure what Black Cactus was, but then I linked with Terrence again and just, his love for culture. So just one day I was bringing some stuff to the kitchen in the desert, and I was like, I'm gonna bring these African masks to Black Cactus. I'm like, I saw the Bible, I'm like, you should have, I'll just let him borrow them, because he's repping for the culture. I want to support. And at the time in my life, I just had so much going on, and wanted to be more active than I was, but just a lot of responsibilities. But I just wanted to at least contribute something and let the brother know, like, hey, let me encourage this brother. Like, you're doing a good thing. Like, create a space for people in the community, internet, tools, media. Like, this is great. This
a real gift.
A gift, dude. This is a gift to this, especially in an area like this. It's like,
it's beautiful.
More people should know about Black Cactus. But I think that they just weren't certain, what it was. Like, oh, is it just for Black people? It's like, no. It's like, I was in here the other day. There's a Brazilian guy doing a podcast in Portuguese. So, I met you here. So.
You seem to embody a lot of what Black Cactus stands for on your own, like independently. How do you see yourself collaborating with Black Cactus in the future? What do you think you would like to see?
I'm just down to help anyone further in any way, that I can help, whether it be through words of care and compassion, creative development, or even someone that I view as someone that can teach me something, or that I'm learning something from, or that I admire for something, because everyone's unique and everyone has something that you can learn, and that's just the beauty of creative spaces, because you're around people that you can gain inspiration from. Like the saying is, like, if you're the smartest of your friends that are in the room, then you need to be in a different room. You need new friends.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I get that. How has this desert in particular, influenced you as an artist?
I mean, it's in a lot of ways. It's just like helped me develop myself in a lot of ways, because I haven't even been creating as much as I planned to create when I first got out here. But now things have balanced back out to where I'm like gearing up to create. But I
You're
think
in like the incubation.
Yeah, in the
stage.
desert, I think forced that because I was, running around trying to survive. I was taking jobs that, weren't necessarily like the ones that I saw myself with a career with, but just, sometimes artists have to survive. So, but just the back and forth of the desert, because, sometimes you're like, wow, this is the most beautiful, blissful place. Like, it's just something I love about it. The stars, like the numerous stars in the sky, and then July hits, and you're like,
it's definitely intense.
Oh, intense in the summer, and just, I got lost in the park once.
Really?
Got lost in the park. I found my way out, but we'll say that don't go in the park after and let the sun set on you without GPS if you're going far away from wherever you were, because everything starts to look the same. But the beauty of the nature here, because you don't think of the desert with nature, but there's so many animals, so much just things. Because I pay attention, like the fly season here, which is like, wow, like I never flies in the desert like this, like what in the world? And at some point I'm gonna paint a really different Joshua tree, just because of many different reasons. But my take on it, just in 29, because I didn't really, everyone says Joshua tree, but they're kind of referring to like anywhere that could be Wonder Valley, 29, Yucca, Morongo, the high desert, just the, you meet some very interesting characters, but then also some of the most enlightened individuals that you're like, how are you out here? And friend Terrence, like he says, sometimes this is a place where the desert, people who've been deserted or deserting life or just feel, and not in a bad sense, just could be someone that is like, dude, I'm not with the status. I've seen people that are like had successful careers in LA or New York, and they just were sick of certain aspects of those things in the industry, so they came out to the desert.
The desert almost represents this like total freedom. You have freedom to do anything you want. You can expand and be as big as you want, and everything is available to you. There are no.
But then you drive back here and you're just like, almost like, because you're there, you're like, am I missing out? Like, how am I
I wasn't just having this conversation.
And then
with
you roll
friends.
back out here and you're like, oh my God, there's like this sense of peace and just,
I'm so aware of myself out here, like my physical body, right? Because I feel the elements so close. Like you said, it's hot out here in
Yeah.
July, right? You can't escape it. Even if you're inside in the AC, you're always impacted by it in some way, right?
And I'm a constant horticulturist. I love plants. I've been a challenge here learning what grows
Cultivation
here.
methods,
Cultivation
yeah.
methods of the desert.
I get
I
that.
sprouted, first year I was here, I sprouted 79 papaya plants.
Oh,
Not one made it.
papaya. Oh, no.
I said, okay, well, all right, so let me just keep going and seeing what does grow here and doing some research. And my kids had this camp last summer, and I was blessed to meet this Native American Cahuilla Serrano elder named Kim Marcus, who's like a local legend, and he's so knowledgeable about all the different desert plants. I didn't even know you could eat barrel cactus. He was telling me how you make creosote tea to heal all types of things. The kids made mesquite cookies with them, so just really cool to have got that experience. And I think it's important to, like, when I go to a place, I immediately want to learn about the history and who were the original inhabitants. And if they're around, like, how can I kick it with them and learn something from them?
I can tell by your extensive collection of sculptures that you showed us.
Yeah,
A real reference for cultural history.
Yeah, and now I'm realizing that history, I'm very it's very complex with like collecting art and sculptures because, in the Judaic-Christian Muslim sense, idols were like forbidden. But then also as I go deeper and I realize that that's only if the person made it an idol. A lot of the original creations of certain things were images to convey divinity because we couldn't, fathom that much power of like pure, like they say, like if God talked to you, it just you disintegrate. Some, in some cultures, but a lot of these people were embodying nature, God, the goddess, spirit, balance and order of like harmony between the masculine and feminine in these creations. So, but I see it as cultural preservation, but at the same time, I've also reached a point where it's like, I know all that's within. I don't need any things, but we go through different stages of life, And
Well, that translates in your work, right? Especially the one directly behind you. It sort of reminds me of some of the masks that I saw in your collection.
yeah, and then I was shouting out Picasso because Picasso, most people don't realize, he was super influenced. Him and Matisse were influenced by African culture. Picasso had one of the largest ethnographic art collections. You can see the influence, but at the time,
That makes sense. I mean, he's from Malaga,
yeah.
which is, you could throw a rock in him, Morocco,
Right. So he was heavily influenced. So I want to get this. I threw in just like a little Fibonacci, like sacred.
All right on.
So like
All right.
the uniformity of like in nature, which Da Vinci was really good at. He was like, I don't like to, Westernly coined as the first artist to study light, but if you look, there's definitely other artists way before him that were aware of the play of realizing how they actually came together,
Would you say that you're inspired by your experiences, that your paintings are almost a way to bring order to the chaos of some of these experiences or some of these environments?
I just hope through my experiences someone can learn and see where I'm coming from, or I can try to like connect dots for people to figure things out. Because from a place of non-judgment, you know, I've tried a lot of different things, but elevated to a point of realizing like a lot of times when we're traumatized, we're running, or we're feeling misunderstood, we're like, there's a lot of outs, you know. It could be eating too much, it could be sex, it could be alcohol, it could be different drugs, you know, so.
You're on the run though.
You're on the run, and then tapping into like versus someone who like, hey, I'm gonna have the occasional mushroom trip, or you know, I can responsibly, you know, not for me, but I'm not gonna judge anyone. Versus the person who has no control, has now become taken over by, which is easy to do because it happens gradually. And I've watched really good friends from really good artists, musicians, people who are like on the verge of success, major success, and then I see them like a year later somewhere, and they're like looking through, or life has just got the best of them, or you know, and it can happen to any of us at any time if we're not careful.
Do you think it's that pressure to succeed or that pressure to perform?
Definitely that, mixed with also unresolved trauma from childhood or life, but the pressure to succeed, I mean, especially after you get a little taste, like, you know, you like a person who got on, had a successful show or got a song on the radio, they weren't like icon status yet, but they had a buzz, you know, and the pressure that comes with that. And then also there's a lot of pressure that comes from, that's where you have to really be secure in who you are, because if you're weak and they spot that, you get control. They'll come in and say, hey, you know what, I like your music, but you need to dress this way, you need to play this way. I watched this with Amy Winehouse, and she told everyone, you know, I'm not, nah, screw that. They're like, you're never gonna make it. And she blew bigger than, you know, exactly, the same, or, you know, look at John Michel Basquiat, you know, people trying to control, they see this untamed, like, expression, and Rauschenberg, a lot of different people, you know, we're pushing the boundaries of a lot of different things, and if you're standing secure in who you are, and not getting taken under by, like, you know, the pressure, because the pressure is real.
What does success mean to you as an artist?
I mean, to me, if something I create gives someone joy, or gives someone an emotional experience, or a education, inspiration, anything that moves someone in any type of way, then I feel like I've been successful.
So you're part of our 100 Desert Artists of Color initiative. So how can Black Cactus facilitate this soul yearning that you're having? Like, I would love to give you the opportunity to do more lectures on the subjects here.
I would love that. I mean, my mom wanted me to be a professor, but I said, you know, I saw the system of the education system in certain ways, but I think we don't even need that now. We look at like podcasts, Joe Rogan, different people just, people want to hear what's real. People are interested in what's real and things that aren't censored and that are just raw. So,
which is your work, yeah. What I'm really excited about, having gotten to know you better through this conversation, is really finding a way to facilitate this wealth of knowledge that you have on so many subjects, and this bank of experiences that you have to draw from, and how that comes through in your art, and how you can really share that with our community, not only just by like displaying or selling pieces, but by really like integrating that knowledge for others in the community, you know?
Yeah, anytime. I mean, that's why I do like the mission of Black Cactus. I think that you made a suggestion earlier that was really brilliant. I think we should follow through on, is having these lecture discussions, but open collective conversations, because while I have like, you know, like when it came to homeschooling, like, you know, the basics of English grammar, history, anthropology, philosophy, man, I'm qualified, more than qualified. trigonometry, calculus. So it's like where Terrence comes in, he's like educating me right now. I kind of resisted tech, you know, and there's a lot of things that I'd like to know, and I just being in environments like this is because you have to be innovative, you know, like a lot of times with my work, people are like, oh, we love you, this character, da 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 da, the energy. Do you have an Instagram? Oh, do you have a website? Or do you have any digital files? Or how are you, you know, and I'm like, meh. And now I'm realizing, like, okay, you gotta choose when to be rebellious. This is not a bad thing.
Protecting your peace, yeah.
But it's a good thing. It's a good thing to evolve and know what's going on and to be innovative and know how to use technology in a proper way. I read the I Ching, which is Lao Tzu, and it says, you know, in ancient times, like people who were in tune, when there was an old proven technology, they stuck with it and they knew it was tried and true. And if there was something new that could be proven useful, then they use that too.
Do you know what the oldest tried and true method is for innovation? It's that collective getting together to have discussions, right? Kenneth and I were recently at lunch in Inglewood at the helm of another collector, and his name's Askia, and Askia had said, he called it gumbo talk.
Mm-hmm. Creole.
Right, when we're just all sitting around having conversations about big ideas and how that's really important to the creative process, like individually, but also important for the group, for the collective, to lift each other up. We're all on the same page, we're all thinking about the same thing, we're all feeling connected to each other, right? Respected by each other as we're listening to each other and really processing what one another are saying, you know, that kind of thing. I would be so interested in exploring that more.
I mean, you just made me realize that's how growth occurs, because we have to be challenged. One of the most challenging things for a lot of art, at least for me and a lot of artists I know from all different types of genre, is collaborative painting or collaborative works. Is very, very difficult because, you know, no idea is original, but we can have the same idea and express it in different ways. And if a collaboration is going down, you're painting something, and then I throw down, and you might be like in a certain feeling or emotion where you're like, man, I'm not feeling what Kachi's putting on this. This needs to go in this direction, which tests and then I'm saying the same thing about you. So now we're like, okay, am I being a control freak? So now I'm checking my ego. I mean, it's just so much that happens. And I see a lot of people bail out of collaborative projects and collaborative pieces because of that, just all the different things. Because when you're painting by yourself, it's all in your control, but being pushed out of your comfort zone and having to work with others, which sometimes it is good to be just in your zone and your view, but
collaboration is a skill.
Yeah, it's a
That's
skill,
what I'm
and it's
hearing you
hard.
say. Yeah.
To me, it's hard to match up with others and make something cohesive that you both are happy with, or the group is happy with, you know, because collaboration can be 2 artists or it can be 5, you know.
You know what would be a cool project for you to lead? Might be like a collaborative, like communal painting. Like let's say we had a handful of people interested in doing like a community painting. We had a big old canvas and we were all kind of collaborating on that. We made it an effort in some way that you led.
I mean, we could even let Black Cactus lead it and have a like Black Cactus open canvas night, you know, where everyone just comes and gets down, you know, and auction it off to help support this place, you know.
That sounds really cool. I love that.
Stuff like that, you know, because we got to give back to those that give to us, and we must sustain the sources that sustain us. So, you know, I'm down for any type of giving back, you know, to the sources that feed me, because that's how we keep everything going, you know. And
Right on.
you know, I used to say that like the bigger I get, the smaller I get, you know, and keeping that in my mind so I don't lose sight, you know.
That really resonates. That really does. All right, Kachi, well, I really appreciate your time. I think you're an incredibly interesting person and artist, and I'm excited to work together.
Thank you.